Welcome to this lunchtime webinar. As I've mentioned, I've not done this before, so I don't intend to offend anyone, but I'm presenting research that I've done from our community and things that I was hoping that you might find useful. So, oh, hold on, that's not a good start. So if you've been to any of our webinars before, you will recognise me. I'm the training manager for Down Syndrome UK. I'm also a parent of a young chap with Down syndrome who's now 16. So just to give you a bit of an insight into what we do, like I say, if you've not been to one of our webinars before, Down Syndrome UK is a national Down syndrome support organisation, and we have, you may know us through our maternity initiative, Positive About Down Syndrome. And as an organisation, we work very closely supporting our families, but it's also really important that we're supporting you as professionals so that you can support our families and give them the best experiences as well. So we've done quite a bit of research into how women were given the news that their baby has Down syndrome, their screening experiences. This data has been published or is about to be published. And also we've done a lot of work into breastfeeding as well, which we're really proud of. We work together with obviously you with maternity professionals as well as health visitors, paediatricians, anybody involved in healthcare really. So our main focus is that we champion the lived experience, because we know that in a lot of cases that you will come across these families, you work with them and then they go along their way and live their lives, and you don't actually know what their experiences was. So this is where our forte lies, I think, is so with that lived experience, we're empowering parents so they realise they belong to a very strong and supportive community. We use that lived experience to educate you as professionals, and we use that lived experience to hopefully affect change in policies, at a government level, and we use that lived experience to enlighten the public as well. So the services we provide our family and for professionals is pretty impressive, actually. Although, I say so myself, but none of this was around when my son was little. And I really think that we're plugging all of those gaps to fully support our parents, as well as supporting you as professionals. And just to show you that we're a credible organisation, we do our surveys every year, just to see whether parents think that we're giving them advice that they trust and they use. And thankfully, the results year on year are pretty good and getting better year on year. So when you're given the news that your child has Down syndrome, these are the most common feelings that parents feel. They worry about the other children that they have. They worry that they may be burdened by having a disabled sibling, particularly one with Down syndrome. And you probably know that statistically siblings are not adversely affected by having a sibling with Down syndrome. Parents worry about the fact that as their child gets older, they'll never fit in and they will live with them forever. They will change, the parents' lives indefinitely, really. And again, with my work with young people with Down syndrome, young adults with Down syndrome, and society today, people with Down syndrome, they don't want to live with their parents. They don't even want support workers coming in to help them. They're striving to get those skills so they can live the independent life that they want. Another feeling from parents is that will they be able to cope with the extra pressures of having a disabled child? And if you've been to any of my other training, you'll see that statistically there are some really good qualities that come to being a parent of a child a child with Down syndrome. But these are really common worries, whatever your cultural perspective is, really. So when I was researching how to do this webinar, I kept getting faith and culture all mushed up, really. So I thought, well, I'd start with definitions of both. So faith is because this webinar will involve both culture and faith. I mean, that's definitely there is a greying of the whole idea of cultural perspective. So faith is a strong internal belief linked to spirituality and religious trust, and culture includes collective customs, traditions, values, and social expressions of groups. So Basically, faith focuses on internal spirituality and culture centers on external social identity. So, as I've said, faith and culture cross over when you're supporting women in maternity, as you know. So, so together, faith and culture create a holistic support system that honors both the inner spiritual journey and the external social integrity identity of women during maternity. So if you've got an understanding of those cultural perspectives of the culture and the faith that these families that's important to these families, if you've got an idea of what that is, and you can build a trust between the women and the caregivers, that will promote positive birth outcomes, especially in terms of mental health of the families, the mothers involved. And hopefully it supports informed, culturally aligned choices. Now, what I've realised from doing research into this, it's a really difficult subject because there is such a variety in beliefs surrounding Down syndrome. So as I said, there's a diversity in the beliefs, values, expectations around childbirth. So not only disability, but childbirth as well, and health. And obviously your maternity care needs to be equitable and compassionate, honouring those cultural identities and supporting informed decision making. I mean, that goes, for as accepted for all maternity practices. So there is obviously no right or wrong belief, only the need for respect and understanding. And the cultural beliefs surrounding Down syndrome and disability, generally vary widely between and within communities. This is what I found from talking to families. And it's really important not to stereotype families according to what you think their cultural beliefs might be, but understanding any common patterns about cultural perspectives may help you anticipate any kind of approaches or support that you might be able to offer those families. So in terms of beliefs about Down syndrome directly, many families, regardless of background, hold strong values of love, protection and belonging for their children, obviously. Some cultures will emphasize community cohesion, like they all raise the child together within their community. And having a child with Down syndrome reinforces those protective cultural strengths. And that's something that you must do as a maternity professional as well, and celebrate the baby as being loved and valued as you would ordinarily for any baby. So I found that some faiths will say that having a child with Down syndrome is considered a gift from God. So, they've been blessed with their child with Down syndrome. Some may consider it to be a test of their faith, that a divine being is testing their faith, and this is part of divine will. So, but also disability can be viewed as a source of shame and something to be hidden due to social stigma or fear of judgment. That some of the women that I spoke to felt that this is something that they did, that they were being punished for something that they did. So sometimes it's linked to ideas of karma, family reputation, or what will others think about, this has happened to my family, and it's brought kind of shame on their family. So obviously decision making for these families can be individual or can be collective, involving the whole community or community elders, and you need to be aware that any decisions that might be made may not be directly just the woman involved. And there's going to be a variation in the respect for authority, compliance and medical advice, and their reliance on spiritual guidance may vary. What I've found out is that some of the information that women may be getting according to their faith or their culture can be really out of date, and you have to be aware that where they're getting their information from surrounding Down syndrome may be extremely out of date, and that's a tricky one to overcome, I guess. So some cultures may have limited exposure to inclusive education or positive disability representation, and I've definitely found that with some of the women that I've spoken to. And Down syndrome might be perceived as a medical problem to fix rather than a different way of being. And I mean, I can't say that I'm coming up with any answers for you, because I don't know how you can explain better, I suppose, to women that if they've got that idea that Down syndrome is a medical problem to fix, rather different way of being. I guess we just need to make them more aware of what a child with Down syndrome, what a life with Down syndrome is likely to be, make sure they have suitable information. And as I mentioned at the end, there are a few support things that we can offer. So in terms of your practice, one of the most important things that you can do, sorry if you know all this already, but as I said, I mean, I welcome discussion about this at the end, because I think we can really help each other with this. So you need to build trust. You need to ask open and respectful questions about their beliefs and needs. And you need to provide balanced information, providing both the medical, social and lived experience perspectives. And that, like I said at the beginning, this is something that we really champion. And our Nobody Told Me book would hopefully help families of all different cultures. So obviously families are the experts in their own culture and their own child. So I think it's about connecting those families so that they can support each other. If there are other children with Down syndrome within their communities, how we can connect them and get them to support each other in the best way, really. So ask, what does support look like for you, and who would you like to be involved in your care? Because obviously they may be getting advice from their community, and they may have elders that they want to be involved in their care, or at least when they're getting the information. So there may be, or just the wider family members is what they need to support them through their maternity journey and when their baby with Down syndrome is born. So it does sound like I've got all the answers here, doesn't it? Communicating the diagnosis with cultural sensitivity. So obviously it's going to be quite tricky navigating screening, diagnosis and culturally appropriate discussions. So what I've found is that many may not consider termination as a cultural choice. And some may find it offensive that you've mentioned termination. So and I know you need to do that as because it's, you have to make sure that women are making those informed choices about continuing their pregnancy or not. But what I could say is that if you've mentioned termination, then you leave it at that. If it's been expressed that it's not a cultural choice for them, it really needs to be documented so it's not mentioned again, because if it is, then you lose that trust. So delivering the news, think about who's going to be present and who do they want to be, who have they said they want to support them in their pregnancy, and they need to be present when you're giving the news. Obviously, you'll use interpreters and culturally competent advocates when you need to in a timely way. You need to avoid deficit-based language. Anything that mentions a negative slant on Down syndrome may be really extra important to those families that do have a particular faith or culture, and they will remember those deficit-based words that you might be using, not just about, the high risk. Obviously, we know that risk isn't used, but just maybe medical issues that some people with Down syndrome might experience, to frame that in a non-negative way. So, I mean, this goes for any kind of family, doesn't it? Ensuring a positive tone and up-to-date language and knowledge of Down syndrome. And I think what I've realised is the best way that we can support these families is to connect them with other families of a similar faith or culture, where they can get that support, within their communities. So I mentioned previously that in some cultures and faiths, the information surrounding Down syndrome can be really out of date. And this is what a lot of women may be getting, basing their ideas on what a life with Down syndrome might be. So this is something that I found, which is called About Islam. Sorry, my screen's really small now that I've got notes attached to it. So it's called About Islam. And this is something that I found, it was a couple of months old, where the question was about aborting a baby with Down syndrome and what are the Islamic perspectives on that. And so you can see in the highlighted area, it says Down syndrome. So look, it says the definition of Down syndrome is a congenital disorder caused by the presence of an extra 21st chromosome in which the affected person has mild to moderate mental retardation, short stature, and a flattened facial profile. So you can imagine that if that's what they've been advised, they've gone to this, well-respected website to get advice on Down syndrome, and that is, that's the information they've been given. It may be the very first bit of information that they're given, and that's going to affect them mentally, affect their mental health and how they may welcome their baby with Down syndrome. So just to be aware of that. Also, I found a paper from 2014, which is prenatal screening for congenital anomalies, exploring midwives' perceptions of counselling clients with religious backgrounds. And it was really based on Muslim women. So this is what was found. The results showed for this research that midwives didn't know the latest day of legitimate termination as taught by Islamic sources, which they quoted as being the first day of menstrual period to 19 weeks plus 1 day of gestation. So there are, termination is allowed for certain reasons. But if it is from the first day of the last menstrual period to 19 weeks plus 1 day of gestation, then this misses out the 20-week scan. So after the 20-week scan, which is when, a lot of a diagnosis of Down syndrome may be made, then, they've missed that opportunity. But what was interesting was that similarly, not all pregnant Muslim women themselves had sufficient knowledge of the rulings of their own specific tradition on termination in the case of a congenital anomaly. So this is where, it becomes quite difficult to navigate, doesn't it? Because I think some women in our community that have children with Down syndrome within different faiths are educating their own faith and culture. So it's been really interesting actually doing this research. So I spoke to a Muslim woman who was telling me that she was doing that. She was educating her community herself, that if people within her community are saying that her child, she'd done something to cause this in her child because Down syndrome is a negative thing. And she's got this lovely quote from the Quran that says, actually, what they believe is that, everybody is sacred, and there's been no error or mistake when her baby was made. And she has a quote from the Quran which I thought was really useful, and you might want to take a copy of that if you come across women that have that idea that having a baby with Down syndrome is some kind of divine mistake, I guess. But according to her, this quote from the Quran, it's not actually the case, and she's educating her own community. So, in terms of lived experience, I've got some quotes here that I've collected from various cultures and beliefs. So, which I found really interesting as well. So initially, I thought I was to blame and questioned why I was being punished, but I quickly reasoned that that simply cannot be true. I vowed then to myself that I would never be ashamed of my child. I was not going to hide him. He was a special gift from Allah and not a punishment, but a blessing. So I think if they've got that information about what Down syndrome, is a negative thing, but actually, their teaching is actually that they are a special gift and not a punishment. The next one, Abbas became my focus, but I also had to make time for my daughter and for my husband. This is when it becomes difficult to find a balance and to decide how to share your time. And in terms of the effect on our marriage and family life, we were able to pull closer. A lot of women have said that because their child is a gift, they're seeing their child as a gift, that they need to give all of their time to their child who's a gift, and that can obviously have a bit of a detrimental effect on any other family, any siblings or partners. So the other quote is, there are many spouses who can't take the pressure and end up leaving. There are times when he feels neglected, of course, but then we try to make an effort to spend some time together. I must admit that whenever I take time out for myself, I can't help but feel guilty because I tell myself my first priority should be my daughter. And I think that's something that a lot of women do struggle with, especially if they have that idea that they've been blessed, they've been chosen to have their baby with Down syndrome, and taking time away from, their chosen role can affect, their mental health and have an effect on their family, a wider family. So further lived experience, my daughter is considered a blessing, a blessed being. Oh, that's it. A blessed being. This is something that another one of the families told me, that children with disabilities are considered blessed beings, which I thought was really good, actually. And now people who were horrible to me for not adhering to pregnancy rituals make time to be with her like they can be saved. And this is what one family told me, that before she had a baby with Down syndrome, some people were saying that it was her own fault. And since they've been born and realizing that their baby's actually a blessed being, they feel they need to spend time with her child with Down syndrome because of the blessing. So she said they should just see her as my daughter, and Down syndrome is just something that happens rather than due to me washing my hair while pregnant. So this is something that I found out as well, that Gujarati Hindus tend to be driven by superstition and ritual. This is what one family told me, which starts before the even birth of the baby. And because I refused to listen, I was informed that whatever happens to my baby would be my fault. And when my daughter was born with Down syndrome, those words haunted me. Obviously, I knew this is all factually incorrect, but with a postnatal diagnosis, this played on my mind. And this woman had suffered really badly with postnatal depression, because although she knew that having a baby with Down syndrome was not down to her not washing her hair or doing not following the cultural rituals that she was supposed to, but it played on her mind, and she's getting that from her family, and it really did affect her. And she was saying that you probably know this already, but it's all been a real eye-opener to me. But washing your hair when pregnant goes back from like ancient times, when women would be bathing in rivers and, streams that may have parasites and all sorts of nasties that would make them ill. So, and that in some cultures today, obviously that's still carried on. And modern women obviously want to have a nice shower to wash their hair. And that may have a knock-on effect within their wider community and wider family. So another quote is, I was consistently asked about the range of disabilities by extended family members, alluding it to be my fault somehow. And this is what happens when you have a baby when you're older. As my daughter got older, I was told not to keep telling everyone that she has Down syndrome, and that we could easily take her to India and get her married to someone who, as she looks normal. Even today, I was asked by an Indian security guard if there was a cure available. So this all comes back down to the outdated information that people are exposed to. So it's all about raising awareness and making sure that life with Down syndrome in the 21st century is realised to these women particularly, and so that they can have information to share with their wider families. I was asked if I had any East Asian origins. I find that actually that some women are definitely told that, because I run my own support group in South London. Oh, sorry, I'm getting some beeps. I could see my daughter had Down syndrome, but I felt everyone was really trying to be positive. I wanted to be heard and acknowledged. So that happens quite often, I think. This I found quite interesting as well. There's no word for Down syndrome. This was in Gujarati, and people with learning disabilities, or those who are neurodivergent, are called ganda, which basically means mad. And it was so difficult to explain to my in-laws in a positive way about Down syndrome. This is another lady that I spoke to, and she said that exactly that because there isn't a word for Down syndrome, and this word for neurodivergent people, it was really hard to get her in-laws on board when it came to, talking about her child with Down syndrome, and that was really hard for her. This is just the last one that I've got. There seems to be a stigma around disabilities, and blame always seems to be attributed to the mother or superstition, black magic. I felt when others were pregnant, we were not invited to their events, as people think you would evil eye their healthy pregnancy, or that Down syndrome is catching in some way. So you may find that some women that you come across may be dealing with all of this other negative attitude surrounding having their baby with Down syndrome, and this is something they're going through on a daily basis. And supporting them through that, having a knowledge of what that might be going on, I think could be really important to these women. So I actually, thinking of Black children with Down syndrome, there's a really good organisation called Black Child Down Syndrome, and I spoke to Tonya Falugi, who's based in Nigeria. Actually, she's one of the CEOs of Black Child Down Syndrome. It's a collaboration between various organisations, and it's actually more of a cultural awareness of Black children with Down syndrome. And when I spoke to her, she said that there's a strong social negative stigma surrounding Down syndrome in Nigeria specifically, and the communities in her area. She's from the UK actually, but she does her work over in Nigeria, that communities offered to pray it away. And sometimes she said doctors don't even mention Down syndrome, when the baby's born. And why that was, she couldn't really say. But what she did say, that when she had her child with Down syndrome, she said she'd never seen a Black child with Down syndrome. And thinking about it myself, Black children with Down syndrome really are not represented. And the fact that they're not represented can have profound consequences on the families. They often feel very isolated with no role models that reflect their experiences. So I've written there stereotypes, assumptions of incompetence, or barriers to inclusion. And if their children are not represented, like I say, it can have a real profound effect on them. And also Black women face a higher risk of developing mental health issues during and after pregnancy. And obviously we want to make sure that this they haven't got that added effect of having to deal with a child with Down syndrome themselves. So how can we support those families? There is a really good organisation called Pandas Tree. The CEO of Pandas Tree is actually as part of Black Child Down Syndrome, the cultural awareness kind of projects that they do. So they provide support as a community of Black and mixed families who have a Down syndrome diagnosis or a child with Down syndrome. They do positive sharing of messages about children from their community, and they have conversations that they might be afraid to have on other cross-cultural forums. So it is a safe platform for them to express any issues that they feel they may have. It sounds really, really good, actually. They raise questions, discuss and share experiences, resources, tips, and accurate information. That accurate information is so important. And this is what they say: Pandas Tree welcomes you under its branches, which I thought was really nice, actually. I like that tagline. So how can we help these families? And from what I've worked out is just making sure that you might be aware of some of these cultural perspectives that you may not have been aware. I certainly wasn't aware of any of them really in any great detail. But also, I think the best thing that we can do to help these families, as from Down syndrome UK point of view, is to put them in contact with other families, because that seems to be the best way of supporting these women. So do get in contact with us, or ask them to get in contact with us, and we can pair them up with other families in their area of a similar culture or faith, but also on a national basis, we may be able to connect people. We certainly cover, most people who have new parents of children with Down syndrome, I would hope, and we can find them. We can definitely connect those families together. So other things, I mean, these are just publications that we provide to everyone, but just make sure, especially those families that may have cultural or faith issues surrounding their child with Down syndrome, the Nobody Told Me book should be pretty good. I think it gives an up-to-date idea of what a life with Down syndrome is and how that can affect families. But it's also it's got those really good aspirations of young people with Down syndrome at the end, which I would hope would help. We have got a couple of different languages in there, but no way is it something that's geared towards different language and different cultures, but there are elements within that actually that I think would be really useful to families. And like I've already said, Pandas Tree for those families who are Black or mixed heritage. And we run a support network for Muslim mums. And speaking to the Muslim mums, it is quite a quiet group. The Facebook group that we have, and I think it's mainly because it's on Facebook, and Facebook seems a bit old-fashioned these days, apparently. Lisa will tell you, because she's been supporting a lot of these women, that they have their own WhatsApp group, which is they use quite a lot. And this is not just for people in the Birmingham area, they've widened it up to UK. So definitely we could put you in contact with someone who's in charge of that WhatsApp group, and they are finding it really supportive in a way that the Facebook group, it isn't quite doing the job that we wanted it to, actually.